Welcome to this presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Welcome to Late to the Party, a program on the Paper Street Pictures Podcast Network. Your hosts for the following are myself, Shawn Talley, and joining me as he traditionally does, he's the Dewey to my Gale, the Stewart to my Billy, the Tatum to my Sydney. Yes, the know-it-all horror guy a la Rad Chad Buckley himself, a fellow member of the Paper Street Pictures production team. He's Mr. Cameron Burns. How are you, Cameron?
That might be the nicest thing anybody's ever said about me. So I am doing outstanding. I'm excited. I'm excited for another episode. This is the highlight of my week. It's all downhill from here.
Right. And I know you're excited about this one as someone who is a fan of the movie in question. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you've already seen it as it's in the title, but we are talking about the 1996 film Scream, a movie that blind spot that we cure this go around with our guests, not just a widely seen film of the genre, but a big part of 90s pop culture that has stayed in the public consciousness to this very day, with two legacy sequels having come out just in the last 2 years of this recording. So before we jump into that, do you want to quickly tell folks the premise of the show as we give a little quick rundown before everyone?
Absolutely. Yes. So if you're new to the show, first of all, go back and listen to the other ones because we've got some outstanding stuff and we've had some really interesting people on. But basically what we do is we reach out to friends, to colleagues, to filmmakers we respect. And we say, hey, man, like, what's kind of your biggest movie blind spot? What's that big pop culture movie that everyone knows it's in the zeitgeist that you just haven't seen for some reason? And inevitably, almost everybody has one. Like, it's just a numbers game and there's only so much time in the day. And so, everybody seems to have one. And so, we bring them on, we talk to them a little about it, we send them on their way, have them watch the movie, and then we talk to them about, what they thought of the movie and then kind of go from there. And because it's October and Halloween's on the rise, and it's spooky season, we are going to do Scream, which is, one of my favorite horror movies and one of my favorite horror series. So this is one I don't really need to rewatch, but I will because I want to.
Yeah, it's one that's fresher in your brain than mine. I've certainly not seen this one in a number of years, and I've only revisited its sequels once a piece, and not even having seen the last couple, which we'll talk about on the backside of things. But this is one I know, again, you're excited about. And the guests we have, we reached out to some friends, including Alex Cuervo, and when he said Scream, that was a whopper, and you were like, that's it. That's the one we're doing. So without any further ado, let's ask Mr. Cuervo why he has not seen Scream. I have a thought and I have a suspicion why, but we'll find out from him on the other side.
Let's grill him.
Joining us for this episode is a musician and composer who's fronted bands including Blacktop and the Hex Dispensers and composed the scores for films like The Artifice Girl, Revealer, and Scare Package 1 and 2. He's a frequent collaborator with Paper Street Pictures, a friend of Paper Street, a friend of the animals, a friend of the devil. He is Mr. Alex Cuervo. Alex, thank you so much for joining us here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm excited for this episode, not just because we're hitting probably the biggest movie we've done, spoiler, but we finally got Alex Cuervo on, who's one of my favorite people. So it's going to be a fun one, guys. You're going to want to hang on for the ride.
Yes, Alex also joining Emily Hagens in the exclusive, has been on both Paper Street branded podcasts now as well.
Yes.
That's true. He's hit for the cycle.
Do I get a patch or a pen?
No, you get nothing because there's one more thing about our guest. Mr. Alexander J. Cuervo Regard has never seen the 1996 film Scream.
What?
It's true. What? Let's be very specific. I've never seen it from start to finish. I don't think it's possible to avoid seeing chunks of that film because it's so, if you like horror, you're always around people that are obsessed with that film or have a lot of nostalgia for that film. So I've seen pieces of it. I'm aware of it. And there's also been so many references in pop culture to that film. I don't think it's possible to avoid it if you're into genre film. But I've never sat down and watched it from start to finish. And I've never seen any of the sequels either. It's one franchise that has completely eluded me mysteriously.
So you know what a ghost face is?
Yeah, I get all the pop culture references and the like Hello Sydney, and there's a ton of things about it that I'm aware of that I just sort of absorbed through proximity and just through pop culture references and stuff. And I've seen, I've been at parties where people were watching it and I've seen scenes from it, but I've never sat down with the intent of watching it like any other film, I've never deliberately sat down and watched any of the Scream films.
So, Alex, I know you as a horror connoisseur, a man with great taste in film and horror. So I guess our first question has to be, how does that happen? How do you live in the world? And you're roughly my age. So
I'm older than you.
Well, I was trying to do you a solid, but thank you for saying that.
Well, my age, I think, has a lot to do with it.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say. Like, you were an adult, or at least not a child, when this movie came out. So how in the world did you manage to avoid these?
Well, so it came out in 1996, and I was 25 years old in 1996. So when I was 25 years old, I was a hipster. You know, I was just in the first band. I'd been in bands for a long time, but I was in the first band that was recording and touring, and I was a cinephile. I like to go to movies, but I think at that period of my life, I was kind of an edgy hipster. And I watched, I went to I lived in Dallas at the time. There was a wonderful art house theater called the Inwood. It was pretty big for an art house theater. But, I would see like The City of Lost Children, or like Reservoir Dogs was there, because this was, before Tarantino was a household name. And so I would go see art house movies and stuff like that. This stuff like The Usual Suspects and like, anything sort of edgy for it at that time. And Scream, to me at the time, I'm guessing it just felt kind of like normie teeny bopper kind of stuff. I loved Wes Craven, Nightmare on Elm Street and Serpent and the Rainbow, especially growing up. But I think at that point I was just at that sort of, that mid-20s kind of hipster, like I'm too cool for this kind of thing. Because it just had a lot of people it felt like pop music to me. It felt like Wes Craven doing pop music. And I was just like, that's not for me. That's normie, that's mainstream, And so I think that was probably my impression of it at the time. And that just, I never sort of course corrected past that, even though I was like, you can't go to like a horror convention or be into horror and avoid it because it's everywhere. But that's the only like explanation I can offer for why that's, absent.
It is kind of funny. And this is a thing that I've noticed in my own life. And I think we've noticed a little bit recording this show, that like, if you miss one of these big things when you were supposed to have seen it, it gets harder. Like, you kind of dig in, and it just gets harder to make yourself go back and watch stuff. You're just like, you become the guy who hasn't seen Harry Potter. Like,
yeah, or like I don't watch television. Like it's always a weird one when I meet somebody that just never watches television, or I don't listen to music, and they just keep doubling down on that as they get older.
Wait, you've met someone that doesn't listen to music?
I've met people that don't like music. It's weird. I don't really. These aren't people that I hang out with or that I'm around frequently. But yeah, they exist. I've met people.
Yeah, no, you walk directly the other direction from them when they say things like that.
Yeah, I mean,
we have met them. Nowadays, it's I think the new I don't have TV is I don't use social media. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean,
they're very interesting.
Tell me how much social media you use, Alex Cuervo. You don't use social media anymore, do you?
I flushed Facebook back in 2016 after Cambridge Analytica, and then when Musk took over Twitter, I flushed that account just in protest. And so now I use Instagram, which I get is a Facebook product, but it seems a little bit more light and a little less complaining and self-indulgent.
So basically, you're the social media version of I don't like music.
No, that's not true. I mean, I use Instagram. I frequently. I mean, I follow a lot of my friends are on there, and I get to see pictures of my friends' kids, and I get to see illustrators and artists that I appreciate. So it's perfect for me.
Well, to the larger point about it, we knew you'd be the first guest we had that truly just admitted I did not see it because I was a hipster. And I don't use that in the pejorative, like you are a hip man, but you are a hipster too, and that's okay. We all are in different ways about certain pop culture media.
I was an insufferable mid-20s hipster at the time. I mean, I'm a lot older now and I'm a lot wiser, and I get that I was kind of an edgy, I was kind of a prick. So
yes, only mildly insufferable nowadays.
Yeah, I mean,
that's true. You're partly sufferable, which is nice.
I'm a little bit more sufferable. Yeah,
you are. As you age, you become sufferable, which is nice. So here's my question, because I feel like we've sidebarred here now into Alex Cuervo's hipsterness. Obviously, you know a little bit about Scream. So I guess the question on my mind, just before we send you off to fix this error, is: do you know how it ends?
I know I have suspicions, because I know that there's the big reveal and the twist, but I can't specifically remember. Now, bear in mind, if I had seen it, I might still have forgotten the end, because I forget everything all the time. But I know there's I think when it happens, I'm not going to be super surprised, because I've probably heard people reference it so many times that it will be like, oh yeah, that's what they meant. There's probably jokes in Scare Package that I scored that I will finally get having watched.
You're going to be like, oh, wait, this movie does make slightly more sense, the scare package movie. And here I thought it just didn't make any sense at all.
No, I mean, there's enough, there's enough of the stuff that lands on me that I was able to power through it.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing if the ending had been fully spoiled, because you did say you've kind of absorbed somewhat over the years, but let's hope that even there are a couple twists. So even if you think you know it, I think a few bits might still surprise you. So they do a good job with the red herrings and stuff. We'll talk about a lot of that on the opposite side after you've watched it here. But yeah, it's funny that the Wes Craven of it all, I know you're a Nightmare on Elm Street fan. He had come back just 2 years prior to do a very meta New Nightmare coming back to that franchise. So this is only 2 years later and it's only kind of meta thing, but
not seen New Nightmare.
Oh my God.
There we go. Here we go.
You are
Every
the
time
worst.
we do this,
you are insufferable. You've lost your sufferableness and you are now insufferable again. Oh, that's so good. You should watch that.
We'll talk about that on the other side though, because yeah, the Craven himself, even early in the movie, like kind of lampshades and makes fun of that franchise. I don't know if that was a Kevin Williamson line or Craven was just cool with doing it, but we'll talk about it on the other side. So we are excited that you're going to watch this one. I do think it will lead you down the path of like, there are fun possibilities they explore in the sequel. So if you do take to it in any way, you're not wrong. It did feel new. It did feel like they were trying to like start, in a grunge destroying hair metal band. Like this movie was like a new era feeling. And they did. They promoted it as like the new MTV style pop stars. All these kids were like just one movie removed from like debuting. This was a big break for a lot of folks. So yeah. I could see you feeling like, oh, this is like the new next wave of something pop. And I could see why maybe it bounced off you in that moment. But I think with 30
I'm
some years.
I'm excited to fix this, because now I've got a totally different perspective on it. And so I'm actually really enthusiastic about it.
I haven't been this excited for somebody to watch one since we found out on the Mummy episode that Emily Haggins is afraid of mummies. So I haven't been this excited for somebody to watch one since then. That was like as much a therapy session as anything else. But I think this one is I think who knows? We'll see what happens. But I think you're going to be like, wow, I can't believe I went this long without seeing that movie. So
that's good. I'm pumped. I'm really excited about it. This is cool.
Well, I am excited as well. So Shawn, you're the official parent of the show. Do we send him off now and make him watch it? I'm excited. Let's do it. Let's do it now.
Yeah, let's send him off to watch it. We will return in just a moment here to get Cuervo's thoughts on the film and much more. So stay tuned. Hey there, welcome back. What was mere seconds for you, the listener, was a bit longer for us. When we last left off, our guest, Alex Cuervo, had not seen Scream. He was late to the party. Total hipster move by Too Cool 90s Cuervo, as we predicted. But at least he got here, and we welcome him back, a more cultured individual, a more learned film viewer and horror fan, a man who has now seen the 1996 Wes Craven film Scream. Cuervo, do you feel any or all of those things now?
I don't know if I would go that far, but yeah, I mean, I feel like I checked a box in one sense. But yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Surprisingly, more than I thought I might.
That is good to hear. We had a slight worry just in the hipsterness of all that is Cuervo. But we learned off air as we were coming back here, again, just moments for the listener, but that Cameron both watched this movie with a unique audience, and that you also watched this movie with your wife, and it was her first viewing as well, which we'll get into. But before we even jump into that, just you, Cuervo, what were your kind of overall macro thoughts finally watching this movie?
Well, I guess as we talked about in the intro, I've kind of absorbed a lot of this film just, contextually in conversations, just being in a kind of a lot of horror related discussions with friends and people I've worked with. So I knew the twist at the end. I didn't remember who it was, but I guess it's an old enough film we can talk about the ending, right? We're not.
Yeah, we're not.
There's no way to skirt any spoilers on a show like this.
Spoiler clauses, yeah. So I knew that there were two killers. I don't think that's a thing you can avoid, this film being as old as it is and people, as enthusiastic as they've been about it. But I didn't remember which character it was, and I wasn't entirely, I sort of sussed it out, in the third act, but like, I didn't know, I didn't have that anticipation going into it because I didn't remember. So I got more enjoyment from it. All in all, it's a really fun movie. And I was kind of trying to filter it through, the like younger asshole version of me. Would he have liked it? if he had seen it in the theater. And I think I might have, still enjoyed it, even being the cynical kind of cooler than thou jerk that I was in my 20s. I think I still probably would have enjoyed it because ultimately, I was an idiot for second guessing Wes Craven, I think.
There you go. And it did ultimately win over those people. It did win over the horror hardcores that maybe were turned off at first glance by it.
Yeah,
it did ultimately win those people over because it is kind of considered a horror classic. But it's funny having watched it. So as Shawn teased, I watched it with my mom and with my girlfriend and with my girlfriend's mom. And my girlfriend had seen it, but the other two had not. And it's interesting watching with them the first time. And then kind of you have to a little bit explain where the world was when this movie first came out. Like
right.
the meta nature of it is just such a thing that it's kind of like explaining Halloween to people. And they're just like, oh, it's just a slasher movie. It's like, yeah, but that wasn't a thing before this movie. And that's kind of what Scream is too. Like all of this, like we lived in a world where zombie movies, no one had ever heard of a zombie before this. And like, this was the first movie that was like, yeah, we live in a world where slashers are a thing. And now this slasher is a thing. And so we're going to talk about it. And so like, it's become so second nature now to like every post-Scream slasher that you kind of have to stop and explain certain things to people for them to really understand how fresh this was kind of when it came out.
Yeah, I think from the hipster vantage point, I think what it was the sellout kind of phenomenon that had occurred in music, where punk rock, because of grunge, had become in the 90s mainstream. That was like mainstream rock and roll. What used to be subculture and was very sacred to a lot of cool kids. The selling out or the mainstreamification of music had soured a lot of us, I think, to when, because we liked horror and all this other stuff. And this was like a big, flashy, mainstream kind of horror thing. I mean, that you could definitely draw a through line from Scream to the string of PG-13 horror films that followed. This is way better, like leagues better than any of those, of course. But I can see the result of Scream. And I need to watch the sequels to really have a more clear sort of opinion on that. But that is something that I did notice.
Yeah, there's certainly an argument to be made that Scream's legacy, like with all movies kind of like this, like it ultimately in the same way that like Jaws kind of brought on the big studio blockbuster, Scream, you could argue, has had potentially a negative effect on kind of horror at large because it caused studios to try to make a bunch of glossy PG garbage versions of it in the same way that Jaws is the reason we have Fast 10 now. But like, yeah, so I could definitely see that. Like, there's definitely an argument to be made for that. But like, yeah, that happened though because this one was so good and because Jaws is so good. Then like Pulp Fiction had kind of the same problem where everyone in the world wants one of those. And so
yeah, I mean, there was a string of like Boondock Saints and like all of the stuff that spun off of that. That's the thing, is that corporate entertainment always tries to recreate hits, and they try to make a formula out of it. And yeah, I mean, so it's not Scream's fault per se for being good, but yeah, there's definitely, let's get a bunch of good-looking TV actors together and throw them in a horrific situation sort of formula,
And Fast 10 exists because of the power and will of Vin Diesel alone, Cameron Burns.
Sorry. It exists because
you're not wrong. But going back to you mentioning like where we were in 96. So we talked about this with the Lost Boys episode, like mid 80s saw the meta horror really kick in with movies like Lost Boys, like Fright Night, like Monster Squad, where the characters were self-aware of supernatural monsters in the universe, be it through like comic books or movies and TV shows, and like applying those rules to their own worlds. And like Wes Craven himself had gone crazy meta only 2 years prior to this with 1994's New Nightmare, which Cuervo will need to watch at some point.
Yeah.
But whereas Craven wrote the meta Freddy Krueger sequel, Scream was written by Kevin Williamson, who did also write some of those things we think of as like the fallout of this movie, which include, I Know You Did Last Summer, The Faculty, Teaching Miss Tingle, and then he went on to do, popular TV shows in Dawson's Creek and adapting Vampire Diaries. So like he certainly was that wave of what you're talking about, where it did mainstream a lot of things, for better or worse. But the meta nature of it, yeah, this was the first time that they're truly citing existing horror movies, I think, in a way that became, now it is such the norm that it's weird when a Walking Dead, when they call them walkers, they're like, wait, are there no zombies in this universe at all? Like now It's weird when there is no lore. Now everything's so meta that it's become a flip where you start questioning, why the hell don't these people know what a vampire hilarious.
Well, and also this is like the first one to really, like, people had, like you said, there were others that kind of danced around it, but this was the first one to really give the wink to you and also use it to the movie's advantage. Like, there's a great scene where Nev Campbell, Sidney Prescott, talks about how they're just dumb bimbos who run upstairs when they should be running out the door. And then she does exactly
Proceeds
that. Yeah, like, it's really smart about... Scream hits this perfect sweet spot of like winking at the audience, but not in a way that it becomes like obnoxious. That a lot of other stuff that followed didn't have that same hovering on the edge of the razor. But this one, it does it in a way that like doesn't become unbearable or annoying or make the characters unlikable. It's just, it's really smart about the way it does that stuff in this.
There's quite a few really clever little, and it's amazing that they pulled it off the way they did, the running up the stairs one. And then there's another one with Rose McGowan making a comment about bimbos, or she makes a comment about breasts, and then the camera pans down, like subtly, like not overtly, but it proceeds to like sort of objectify her like 3 frames later, after she makes that comment. There was a lot of real subtle kind of things. I mean, it's just a really well constructed film. It was way more entertaining than I expected it to be, especially knowing as much about it as I did. Seeing it sort of concurrently, I had a really good time. We both did. My wife and I both enjoyed viewing it.
Well, and the crazy thing about it is, like, it works way better than it should as a simple mystery movie. Like, that someone's going to be Scooby-Doo at the end.
Yeah.
And it does such a good job of
and that's Matthew Lillard.
Yeah. It becomes like
literally
exactly Scooby-Doo.
Literally,
Scooby-Doo.
Zoinks.
But he like it does such a good job of making you think other people are the killer and then giving you reasons to think they're not. And like they give you breadcrumbs in one scene and then they give you a red herring in the next scene. And it's just like, by the end, you're like, I don't know who it is, but I feel like it could be anybody. Yeah. And a lot of times in movies, not even horror movies, just mystery movies, by the end, even if you don't know who it is, you're down to only a couple people just by sheer what we've seen other people do. And this one does a really good job of that. And the other thing that I've screamed, no pun intended, from the rooftops forever as a reason this movie works in a way that other slasher movies don't, is it has this really, and you're only the one Scream in, so you can't totally speak to this, Alex, but it has this really cute kind of side love story between Gail and Dewey that you keep expecting to go south in some way, and it just doesn't. It's just this like really kind of meet cute side romance story thing happening while all this other stuff's going on. And like, I can't think of another, even post this movie, slasher that does that as well as this does.
Did those two did they get married?
Yeah.
Yeah,
they got married in real life.
So the chemistry, because there was palpable chemistry between them. So it was, there is a sweetness to that relationship. But I do need to see the sequels. Again, I'm sort of tangentially aware of a lot of the things that happen in the sequels, but I need to view them in the proper, order and in their own context. I think.
Well, I mean, it's no real spoiler, but the Dewey and Gale thing, obviously, it kind of grows as the series grows, and they become kind of the 1A and 1B to Nev Campbell's Sidney Prescott, and those three become this like really great triangle that makes the Scream movies really work, even when they shouldn't work. Like, the three of them kind of make it work, and it's because of that love story that just, it doesn't exist. There's no like side love story in Halloween, you know what I mean? Like, there's no, it's just such a weird thing to think about, but they do it so well you don't even think about it, and that's what's crazy. But it totally works. I'm sure the Weinsteins probably wanted to cut that out of the movie. Like, they wanted to cut everything good out of the movie because they essentially, if the lore is to be believed, hated everything about this movie. They wanted to change pretty much everything. They hated the mask. They hated the tone. They hated the meta. They hated the everything. It's kind of a miracle the movie ever got made to begin with. I think it was probably just, we want to work with Wes Craven. But they pretty much fought the movie kicking and screaming until it made, $80 million.
Yeah, they were at the peak of their kind of tyrannical bullshit in the 90s with the Dimension and Miramax and all that. And there's stories about how they called and like screamed at Craven a few times to where he almost just walked away. So
wow.
To that point, it's kind of a miracle that this all worked as well as it did.
Yeah, and so you probably knew this was coming, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least talk about the cold open, which is arguably, cover your ears, Psycho, but this is arguably the greatest, cold open in horror movie history. I assume you knew that was coming?
Yeah, actually, I'd seen the cold open's the thing I had seen almost in its entirety already. That's sort of the longest chunk of the film. I mean, the trailer has a big, the first half of the trailer is that cold open, isn't it? I mean,
because they don't want you to think Drew Barrymore's in the movie for 10 minutes. That's their way of baiting and switching, which is actually really smart.
Yeah, that's true. No, I thought it's great. It's really, really great. It's really tense. It's really well kind of set up. It's excellent. I will say that the whole time we were watching the cold open, my mom was very concerned the popcorn was going to catch on fire, and to the point where I don't think she saw anything else. And then when we saw the popcorn on fire, instead of being like, I was right, she was like, whole house would have burnt down by then. It's like, okay, Mom, come on, we're trying to watch. Not wrong.
This is a masterpiece, and you're worried about the popcorn burning percentage. I'm like, come on, Mom. She came around. She loves the movie.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's fascinating to me about the craft of editing is that putting things, when you're constructing everything, having everything time out just so, it seems maybe the most difficult aspect of it to me.
Well, what's funny about this movie, too, is like, first of all, I feel like because it happened, it's not like, Stranger Things going back and redoing it, but like, I just got this, as a guy who graduated from high school in 1998, I got this like nostalgia bomb watching it this time that I don't even really think I've gotten previously, where like everything about it just feels so perfectly 90s. Like the way the characters are dressed and the just everything about it, like the movie just feels so perfectly time capsule to that. But the popcorn feels of a different era. Like the popcorn, the Jiffy Pop thing feels of a different era. I don't know if that was just, we want something to catch on fire and a microwave isn't exciting or what, but it's funny that is kind of the one thing in the movie that doesn't feel like 1996.
Yeah,
like,
it's definitely 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was still around because I still enjoyed it. But yeah, it had been basically, that was definitely a throwback to have her do that, because I can't remember whether microwave popcorn had really caught on at that point. It must have. Well,
it is funny to think back and be like, wait, were there cell phones in 96? Or like, where were we in the cell phone lineage in 1996? They existed because one person has like the Zach Morris Ginormo phone, and Billy has like the cool fancy phone, which I guess he borrowed from his dad or something.
Yeah. It seemed like wealthy people only at that point had the smaller. Yeah.
And I think we can all agree that horror movies were so much better before cell phones. Like, I wish we could all just get together. We should get all the the gatekeepers of horror together in one room, like how the mafia gets like the Dons together. We should get all those guys together, and we should just decide that every horror movie should be made in a world without cell phones. It's just I need that to happen. Get Jordan Peele on the phone, get these guys in a room, and let's just make the decision that cell phones aren't a thing in horror movies, and we're just going to it. It's like an alternate universe.
It's like Walking Dead with the walkers, but in a world that's as technologically advanced as ours, but with no.
Exactly. It's like the one thing. It's like when Stewie goes back in time on Family Guy and shows back up and like one thing's changed. It's that. Oh, cell phones were never existed. Perfect.
You mentioned it being kind of stuck in the 90s, but I think a testament to it is that they use house phones and they use cell phones. I think this movie could have been made in the 80s and hardly anything changes, or in the mid 2000s, hardly anything changes. And I think it's because they do a little bit of both. Like they call Drew Barrymore's character on the house phone. She's just got a cordless house phone. So like there's a mix of that. I think the movie still plays if you do it in the 80s with just house phones, or if you did it 10 years in the future when everybody had the cell. So
well, the cell phone works because they're not ubiquitous, like not everybody has it. It is, if the killer's got the cell phone, that's scary, if the killer's the only one with the cell phone.
Well, and once you watch I assume you're going to keep watching Scream movies at this point, Alex, until until you're making fan fiction about it. But as the series goes on, you'll kind of see how they toe that line and dance that dance once cell phones become a thing and they have to pivot. And because, the thing about Scream 2 is that they don't run from technology. Like we have, the camera van and the time delay on the feed in the house, which they do really well. And like, they definitely embrace technology. So as technology changes, you'll see kind of how they mess with that in the series, and mostly for the better. Like they do a good job of it, better than most of being able to make it work. I mean, obviously, like, you know, the cold opens aren't on house phones and on Scream 6, you know what I mean? So like they definitely have to get there, but there is something magical about Scream falling in this world where cell phones, like perfect timing, where cell phones are a thing that they can use in the movie without being bogged down with all the negatives of cell phones now in horror, where everyone can just warn everyone immediately and take pictures of the bad guys who's walking towards you. And like it's just, it did seem to land. I mean, I do agree with Shawn that they could make it work in kind of any world, but like this was the right place and time for this movie. Yeah. From a technology standpoint. I mean, from an everything standpoint, but also from a technology standpoint. But yeah, after the cold open, I mean, the movie is so tight. I mean, it's like a tight 90 minutes from then on. And like, you just kind of hit the ground running, and there's no fat on this movie. There really isn't. Like everything's.
No, it's true. It's absolutely true. Even though, like, I mean, you know, you could have cut a lot of the principal stuff, but when you have Henry Winkler in your cast, you know, you're going to utilize him as much.
He seemed like more of a. I didn't really realize the first few times I'd seen this that like he's kind of a creep. Like he like touches.
Oh God, yeah.
He touches Sydney's face in like a really weird way.
Oh, that was being interviewed. It's really creepy.
Yeah, like I never really picked up on that as much as I did in this one. But yeah, like,
none of us did at that time.
Oh God, yeah. There was a real there's a real creepiness with that when I watched it this time. But and also like I think that they give him some time, and that they give the police chief and some people like that. I think it helps with the mystery of it. Like he's legitimately someone who could be doing it until he's not. Spoiler.
Nicest guy in Hollywood. When you're told that for decades, you want to go against type once in a while.
Yeah.
I was really stoked that I missed, I mean, obviously, I don't know if we're going to talk about Easter eggs, but the Wes Craven cameo was especially funny and good.
Fred the janitor?
Yeah.
Yeah, Fred the janitor. But right next to that was Henry Winkler looking through the closet, and the Fonz jacket was in the closet.
Yeah.
That was, I caught that all on my own, and I was really proud of myself.
Look at you, Alex Cuervo. What a guy. He's getting them all. Yeah, there's definitely subtle ones.
Plenty of them, probably.
I like when in the beginning with Drew Barrymore's character, Casey Becker, is like, I like the first Nightmare on Elm Street. The rest of them suck.
Yeah, that was a great one. That was especially.
And that's kind of what makes this great, is like Craven is willing to take it. He delivers it a few times, but he also is the brunt of the joke.
Yeah.
I think that kind of makes it more funny. And it's there's Easter eggs throughout, but I also think, like, again, they do such a good job of like the boots are the same boots that the sheriff is wearing. Just like little throwaway things like that make everyone a suspect, and are so smart the way the movie goes about it. And like, by the end, you kind of figure out who your main suspects are just by people just falling off.
By who was present and who wasn't whenever something happened. But the two killers was a clever way around that, and then having Skeet Ulrich, you know, what do I have to do to prove to you? And then immediately, again, another one of those, like immediately after the line, the action occurs.
Yeah, it is really well crafted from just a writing standpoint, like how they made that. Kevin Williamson, I mean, we see that, like, he takes some crap again for building this world of, you know, Scream knockoffs, but like most of his, you know, Halloween H2O, I Know What You Did Last Summer, were the good ones. So like they were the relatively, none of them were ever Scream again, but they were so good. Also, I think Stu specifically, he should win some sort of award, like the Nicolas Cage overacting award, because that character is so funny. Like everything about Matthew Lillard's performance in this movie is both hilarious and over the top and trying way too hard, but like in a Nicolas Cage way that it just 100% works.
You could have a drinking game. I mean, if you were doing shots of every time he sticks his tongue out. That's such a Matthew, and I like Matthew. Matthew Lillard's like pretty much the perfect Shaggy. The perfect person to play. I loved him in like SLC's Punk. I like when he plays a less bro kind of character and more of like a misfit. I think he's more likable for me in that capacity. But him as like a chode bro is oh God, it's just brutal.
It's too good. There's that weird like dancing scene and She's All That sticks out too in the same era. But I will agree with Cameron that once the reveal happens and it's him and Billy and they stab each other, every line out of Lillard's mouth is like some kind of award-worthy thing where he's just like,
the bleeding out. Yes, yeah. I agree.
My mom and dad are going to be so mad.
Yeah. I'm freaking dying here, man.
Yeah. He is magnificent in that last kind of post-stabbing section. I completely agree.
He's so good. The whole cast is good. I mean, like, this is another one. We talk about this some on the show. Like, we're constantly talking about movies like Lost Boys and Footloose and all of these movies that could be bad, but they have this cast that rises them above like the standard knockoff bad version of that same kind of movie. And this is the same way. I mean, you've just got a cast of both heavy hitters before, but mostly heavy hitters after, with like Drew Barrymore and Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox and David Arquette and Rose McGowan and Skeet Ulrich and Matthew Lillard and Jamie Kennedy and Liev Schreiber, who you barely even get Liev Schreiber in this one. Stay tuned, Cuervo. He's coming bigger in the next couple.
Yeah, you'll see Cotton Weary again.
Cotton Weary is a thing. And then Shawn, I know you noticed this, near and dear to our heart, Francis Lee
absolutely.
McCain.
I know what you're going to say.
Francis Lee McCain, the second member of the Late to the Party Hall of Fame, the second person to come up in two different movies. This is a woman who did Footloose, Gremlins, Back to the Future, and Stand By Me in back-to-back movies. She is everyone's mother. Miss Dewey's mom, Dewey and Tatum's mom. She's basically everyone's mom in the 80s and 90s. And she's every bit as good as she was when we talked about her in Footloose. And I'm sure it's only a matter of time before we're talking about her in Gremlins and Back to the Future and Stand By Me. Because
friend of the show, as we said, we that's what we're calling our Hall of Famers. Joining Diane Wiest, who also played a bunch of 80s moms.
Yeah, we're really killing it with the 80s moms. Diane Wiest and Francis Lee McCain are the first two members of the Hall of Fame. We should really get some sort of website so we don't forget these things where we track the Hall of Fame members. But yeah, I mean, the cast is just incredible. I mean, obviously, you know, some of them went on to bigger stuff than others. But I mean, even people like Rose McGowan, Skeet Ulrich, Jimmy Kennedy, who aren't huge now. I mean, there was a hot minute where after they were on fire.
Man, and in the 90s through the turn of the century, they were all getting plenty of work.
Yeah, and then obviously Liev Schreiber just explodes from here, and then Drew Barrymore is Drew Barrymore. But yeah, and then Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette are just such an integral part of this series that they never kind of go out of style because they just keep popping up. But yeah, they do a really good job of building a big cast. So like there's a world where you can do sequels. That's another thing that I think a lot of horror movies struggle with is like you do a movie like Halloween and it ends and you're just like, well, there's one person alive basically that we know. Right. And like this one, you know, there's a bunch that are dead, but there's a bunch that are still alive. I mean, you got Randy still alive. You got Dewey still alive. Gail still alive. Sydney still alive, you know.
So is there like a Star Trek red shirt phenomena in the sequels where, you know, new people show up and you're pretty much, they're all going to die?
Not really. They do a good job of like blending those people in. It's not, I would argue, not to get too far down the rabbit hole of the sequels, but like I would argue that the sixth movie, the last one, is the first one to have that problem. The first one where you're just like, oh, you're new here, you must be dead soon.
Right.
Like,
right.
I think the other ones 2 through 5 do a really good job of not doing that and bringing new people in and making them characters and taking some of the old characters and getting rid of them and killing them off. Like it does a good job of that. It doesn't feel too heavy-handed in that way.
Cool.
Yeah, I just love that cast. Like just something about it. And also they just feel perfect of that world. Like you've got these people like Jamie Kennedy and Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich who never really peaked above this, right, but they're just so right in this. Like they just feel like you said, we're all old enough to remember. They just feel like that guy you knew in the 90s. Like they just like Stu. There were Stews in your high school. We had Stews. You know what I mean? And so like they wore Jinkos and they were there, and it didn't make the world better, but they were there. Oh yeah, Jinkos. That's a thing still.
Drew Barrymore being the highest profile name at the time. And again, she's on the poster. She's above the line credit, you know, and them killing her off the way they did was still a cool thing because you did not get that from the trailer. You just thought she was one of the main players that's going to be haunted. But speaking of time and how it doesn't make sense to our brains anymore since the 2000s, like this movie's now, 27 years old? This was only 14 years after E.T. Like it's hard for us to fathom the difference in the 80s and 90s weren't that great of a distance, but we sort of separate those decades because there was different styles and different everything. But yeah, she's like barely out of, you know, being a child. She's as young as the rest of these folks.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's still playing as a high schooler. Like,
yeah, they're all playing high school.
They were all about 2021 playing 18. Right. Yeah, it wasn't like a 90210 travesty. Yeah. Well, it wasn't, they weren't 35 like the Beverly Hills 90210 cast.
Right.
They were all.
Yeah, Ian Ziering right now is 70, I think. He's 70 years old right now. That guy was like 42 on Beverly Hills 90210.
Wow.
He is probably the most negligent casting of any. Like he was straight out of Scare Package. That was like a 45-year-old man in high school.
Negligent
also,
casting. I think he was like the fifth oldest one because the girl who played Andrea and the two main guys with their crow's feet, I think, were all older than him.
Their crow's feet. And I think it is probably worth mentioning that because we all have ties to Scare Package. Alex Cuervo obviously did the amazing score for both Scare Package 1 and 2, and Shawn Talley did lots of things like producing and cleaning up poop, but that's a story for another day. But producing that's the world we live in.
Isn't producing cleaning up poop? Literally,
yeah, that's the world we live in. You both produce
literally and figuratively.
But there's a lot of Scream in Scare Package, both in,
of course, yeah,
in like a very obvious way, as in we're referencing Scream, but also in like Scream crawled so we could cartwheel. You know what I mean? Like Scream metaed so we could like obscenely meta. Like they like toe the line between real movie and
they did it just right so that we could overdo it.
So that we could do it just wrong. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that movie owes, we owe a lot to Scream. We'd be Shawn and I might be working in like a Dollar General store right now if it wasn't for Scream. So
we might still end up there.
Well, yeah, jury's still out, but
we'll be through the janitor.
Well, Shawn's cleaned poop before, so he could get janitor pretty much anywhere.
Yeah. Well, some of that I want to ask Cuervo real quick because of the nature of our guest being a film composer. Did anything stick out to you? Because I know there's some needle drops in here, like Nick Cave's Red Right Hand, which actually appears in a couple of sequels, but it also shows up later in the franchise. But like
every
cover of School's sequel. Out. Oh, is it every one? Sorry,
every sequel has Red Right Hand. I'm
telling on myself now. I've still not seen 5 or 6 yet. So yeah, I will believe you.
Yeah, every movie has Red Right Hand. That becomes like a thing.
That's awesome. Because that was an album that I was super into then. And back then I could see myself being super pissed that they used it. That's not for them. This is ours. Right. They can't.
Metallica cut their hair. How dare they?
But that song has been needle dropped in so many movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one that could be retired this year. Like No Sleep Till Brooklyn showed up in 3 movies this year. It's like, all right, we're good.
Well, I think also Alice Cooper's School's Out is what pops up in every high school movie. So
yeah,
I mean, I guess that's how Alice can still afford to play golf every day. But like that thing's needle drop maybe in more movies than anything. Like I can't.
This was early in with the Moody cover though, because one of the opening needle drops is a cover of Don't Fear the Reaper.
Yeah.
Again, a little on the nose, but it's been used in a lot of things. But
that's the thing. It is really on the nose, and they did that version times where they. I don't know who did that actually.
I didn't look it up. I just wrote Moody cover of.
We don't do research.
But that was like before the Moody cover thing sort of happened, that's in trailers that happened so many years later, the like soft kind of gloomy cover song.
They did do that thing that Scream movies are notorious for, which is like doing little things like playing Don't Fear the Reaper over the guy who's the actual killer and stuff like that. Where they're if you're paying attention, someone in the movie or something around the movie is telling you who the bad guy is. You're just not listening or paying attention. Like the Scream movies are kind of notorious for that. And that is one of those where like Billy, they're telling you Billy's the killer without actually telling you Billy's the killer.
Back to crediting that movie though, and the structure of it is they overdo him as a red herring to where it's like they're trying to throw you off the scent because it is so obvious for so long until the moment Ghostface comes up behind him. And even then there's like a little doubt still.
Yeah, can we talk about how they told the Richard Gere gerbil story in a movie? Can we knock that out real quick? Because there's pop culture and then there's pop culture. But like, I feel like anyone who watches this movie now has no idea what that is. But anyone who's our age
knows exactly what
that is. That was like the biggest, weirdest, made up nonsense story of like the 80s and 90s that Richard Gere had.
Wait, it's not true?
Well, I don't know Richard Gere personally, so it might be, but it's gone away in like our older age. But like the Richard Gere dribble, like that is such a like that is just such a weird reference in the movie.
I do wonder if millennials know it as well. Like Cuervo's in a similar age range as us, but like we were hearing like the Rod Stewart went to the hospital to get his stomach pumped.
Right.
We've heard Marilyn Manson removed a rib.
Jamie Lee Curtis was born with both male and female genitalia. That was a rumor for a long time.
That's right. Yeah, there's so many of those. But yeah, the fact that Rose McGowan's character cites that, I'm like, well, if you hear this enough, people are just going to believe it's true. And she straight up cites the Richard Gere gerbil story as proof of that.
Oh, it's so good. I just like every time that comes up, it takes me totally out of the movie, but like in the best way. Also, other than that, like most of the references and it's still, stuff from that age period or that time period doesn't always hold up super well, both in terms of like feeling stale and stupid references, but also just like movies like American Pie and Kevin Smith movies get into a ton of trouble for like stuff you can't do anymore. And really, there's not a lot of that in this movie. The only thing I can think of,
it's weird. I made the comment at breakfast this morning to my wife that it's like, wow, it's kind of refreshing to see a film from this time period that's not like super racially insensitive. And she says, well, there wasn't really a lot of people.
Yeah, how can you be racist if there's no minorities in your movie?
Every single person in this movie.
They do correct that also in the sequel as soon as part 2, but I said that to Cameron too. I said, this is the whitest movie I've ever seen.
It is super white.
It's very white. But the only thing I can really think of is that there's a few fat phobic things where Gail's kind of given her cameraman the business for being such a fat guy. And I'm
like, and he's not that big.
Yeah, Shawn and I are much bigger than him. And
we're like double the size of this man. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like double his size. But he does eat a new bag of chips in every single scene. It's a new bag of chips. That's true. Every single one.
And that is a fat guy move, I will say.
W. Earl Brown from Deadwood.
Yeah, from Deadwood. I thought, that's exactly.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
Oh man, I didn't even connect that, but yeah, that's totally who that is.
Yeah, I was trying.
I love him.
Yeah, he was really good.
Yeah, it's well. Also, another thing that kind of hit me as I was watching it that I kind of remembered, but I didn't really remember is like the last 45 minutes or so of this movie are basically one giant set piece at Stu's house. It's crazy how long. Every time I watch it, I feel like it gets a little longer there, but like they're at Stu's house for a really long time.
Yeah,
like it's basically half the movie is spent at Stu's house.
Yeah.
Which is kind of wild, and it doesn't feel. It's really hard to do that and not make it feel stale. And I also love that the way they get like another perfect like understanding horror and in the meta aspect and using it to your advantage. I love that they needed to get people out of like from a writing standpoint, from a structure standpoint, they needed to get people out of the house. And so they get a call and it's like, hey, the principal's hanging from the goalpost. And in any other world, they're like, we better hunker down and not go anywhere. And everybody's like, sweet, let's go check it out before they cut him down.
Let's go look at him.
Everyone leaves. And I'm just like, that is so good. That is such a like. There are so many bad, heavy-handed ways to get all these kids out of the house. Right. That is the best way. That is the best way to get those kids out of the house. And it's funny. It's a moment. And like, it's just so good. It's just so. Speaking of moments, anybody want to take a favorite line, favorite moment? Like, does anybody have a line they loved? I have a line that I love.
Well, hit us with yours first. Because I
love when Dewey and Gail go on a walk. And Dewey asks Gail if she knows what constellation that is. And she says,
I don't know either. I was just asking.
Dewey is the best. And he says, I don't know. I was asking.
I don't know either. That's why I was asking.
God, that is so funny.
How can you not fall in love with that goof?
Yeah, he's so good. Like that is my favorite line by a mile in this movie. I mean, there's a bunch of super famous ones, and there's it's called tact, you fuck rag is one that people used to say all the time. But like it's funny, there's a bunch of big ones, but there aren't really. It's not Casablanca when you think about it, and there's like it's not a movie where it's like quoted a ton still. It's just a movie everyone loves. Like there's funny lines, but there's no like it's not Anchorman where you can still go to a bar.
I mentioned this in the intro that much like Hello Clarice, Hello Sydney itself has just kind of been like a truncated version of a line that people think about where he.
Yeah, well, it's also I want to play a game has kind of been stolen by Jigsaw, where like the big one in this one was the guy on the phone saying he wanted to play a game. Do you like scary movies? But like now Jigsaw is like, how I want to play a game. And like they kind of stole the killer's like log line, at least from the first movie. It doesn't really keep up that way. But it is weird that happens. So there's no big killer like quotable line really.
Well, Hello Sydney is like before we watched it, that was I was totally knew that was a Scream reference whenever I've heard other people make that,
Okay. Yeah,
so it is pretty tightly woven to that film.
All right, I'm wrong. You heard it here first, guys. Alex Cuervo says I'm a big dumb idiot.
I don't know if it's because it's in the trailer for the film.
Well, it's hard for me to know. Like, yeah, it's I've seen it so many times that like I don't hear that as much. But I guess like it is a thing. But yeah, like There's just
Well, that
not,
keeps
there's a lot of
happening, right?
I was gonna say you might even be conflating the sequel trailers with a killer, a new Ghostface calling and saying hello. City.
Yeah, I mean it happens,
Yeah,
but it's not like it's not in the same way that like it's a catchphrase like I want to play a game or like from Saw or something like that. It's like It's a thing that's said because Pete talks to her, once a movie at least. But yeah, I don't think of it as like a famous catchphrase in the same way. But I guess it is. I mean, it is pretty well known. Obviously, you hadn't even seen the movie and you knew it. So
yeah.
It's funny. Normally we have this like long list of amazing famous lines, but for a movie that's meta, this doesn't have a lot of big lines in the same way that a lot of other movies this popular do.
Game over, man, or
Yeah, like Saw is ripe with them. Like and a lot of the big. I guess it's not a big horror movie. There's not a lot of like big quotes from horror movies. I mean, there's a few, but I think that's more of I don't know. I don't know why there's not as many in this one. I mean, there's definitely good lines. There's lines that make me laugh and stuff like that, but there's nothing that really, other than the one we kind of talked about, that really cut through the zeitgeist and is a thing that people still say today. There's some lines from The Exorcist that are a thing, but like really horror in general kind of, I feel like doesn't do catchphrases in the same way that some other genres do, or like famous lines. But
your mother sews socks in hell. Yeah, be a TV edit. Great TV edits of all time.
Shawn, did you have one you liked?
I liked when Principal Himbry, I wrote his name down instead of just writing Fonz over and over in this document. Said your entire havoc-inducing, thieving, whoring generation disgusts me. I feel that.
He was pretty great. Aside from the creepy chin touch at the police interview, he's always. I
love how he just fucking expelled some kids. He was just like, "You're out, get." Like they put a mask on and they got kicked out of school forever. It's like the principal's not messing around, man. Like that guy, he's like Mr. Clark from Lean on Me. He's just dropping bombs on people. But,
having just finished Barry recently, I'm always happy when he shows up, but
I'm so glad that Barry gave him like a platform to really show that he's like a really great actor and not just the Fonz and a guy that shows up and like plays the Fonz and like he I don't think people realized how good of an actor he actually was until Barry, which is nice. Also, if you're not watching Barry, or if you haven't watched Barry, I guess it's in the past now, you're dear listener, start watching Barry because it's one of the great shows.
It is ever. Great. But so you can't if you're gonna talk Henry Winkler, you can't forget Gene Parmesan.
I was about to say the same thing. Cameron's like, he's never done anything but Fonz stuff. I was like, no, man, Arrested Development. He's bounced around a lot of things.
No, I mean, he's great in Arrested Development. He's great in a lot of stuff. But I mean, I think Barry's the first thing to show that he could really act. You know what I mean? Like,
sure. He's done a lot of sitcom-y stuff. I don't disagree with that. Like,
I don't. I love the guy. I think he's hilarious. And Gene Parmesan's amazing in Arrested. And like, I think he's great. But yeah, like it was nice for him to get a real meaty role, especially at that age. Alex Cuervo, would you believe that Scream was the 74th highest grossing film of 1996?
Man, I thought I would have put it a lot higher if you were just asking me, but I'm not good with numbers. I
would have put it a lot higher too. And in fact,
I was shocked to see that number too.
In fact, I only know that because it's on our document. So Shawn Talley might be punking me, and I might have just said something really.
No, that's correct. Trust me, I kept scrolling down the list to see. I think it ended up with about 26 million. It just was a year that was dwarfed by like Independence Day and Twister and some other major movies, the first Mission Impossible, The Rock. So it's one of those that gained a lot of cred in video stores and home video.
Yeah, it did definitely continue to build, but it is funny how 103 million worldwide for Scream felt like a cultural phenomenon, and now what is it, 500 million for the last Indiana Jones was a bomb. Yeah, it's funny to see where we've gotten over the years and how the box office has become so wonky that like this thing has spawned 5 sequels and a TV show, and it was 74th at the box office and made 103 million. Like it made $6 million in its opening weekend. It's those were the good days when you could actually build an audience and not become by Saturday afternoon already be a bomb when you came out on Friday. But yeah. Hopefully that stuff gets fixed soon. But it is crazy to me that there were 73 movies higher grossing than this that year. I mean, I get that that was like the time of the blockbuster and Independence Day and Twister and movies like that are always going to dwarf you. But like 73 is a lot. I don't have a list in front of me. If I did, I'm sure there's some real garbage in there.
I'm looking at it. Yeah.
Hit me with some garbage.
Eraser was number 11.
Love it.
That's crazy. But,
Island of Dr. Moreau outgrossed it.
Wow, that's crazy. That was not considered great. That did not spawn any sequels. That's crazy. It's just crazy. There
testament to, like you said, how much we talked about Princess Bride and others where like they're so ubiquitous, and you see it the year it came out, it's like, oh, it was kind of didn't really make a dent, but home video, hell of a drug, man, if something could catch on throughout the 80s and 90s.
It's the staying power. Wow. I can't believe domestic Scream beat Fargo. They're 74th and 75th.
Wow, those two are never going to make it. They just didn't make enough money.
Isn't that crazy?
They certainly won't get TV shows. Was there an Eraser TV show? Because I don't think there was.
No, but there was a Scream one also. People forget about MTV,
which was actually good. Yeah, it's. I guess funny is not probably the right word, but like it goes to remind you a little bit that the first weekend, even now, is not the be all end all. Like movies will find an audience. Obviously, with home video and staying power in the theater, that was a lot easier back in the olden days. But it just, the more we do this, and the more you see that like Princess Bride was like number 20 or something and all this stuff. Yeah. It just goes to show you that, it takes a minute to really see what has staying power and to really see what can make it. So if you got a bomb out there, just know that, give it 20 years and you could be screaming.
Yeah, you never know. Man, this is, looking at this list is completely blowing my mind. 72, Kingpin. 73, The Craft. 74, Scream. 75, Fargo. 76, The English Patient. But I guess
are we sure this list isn't upside down?
No, it's weird.
Yeah, it's the place to be that year was in the 70s. That's where you win an Oscar, and that's where you get sequels.
Yeah.
It flipped at number 69, in fact, down Periscope. You were looking at it upside down.
Wait. Down Periscope, it made more money at the box office than Scream?
Yeah.
By a smidge. Yeah.
No, I did.
By about $1 million.
I cannot, that does not compute in my
Again,
book.
Just domestic, worldwide is where Scream picked up 100 million.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I just, oh God. So if you're wondering if Americans were always stupid, you can go back to 96 to know that at least back then they were. So God, down Periscope, which actually isn't unfunny, but like the fact that made more money than Fargo and Scream blows my mind.
That was that mid-90s stretch where they were adapting every possible TV show ever from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And Brendan Fraser was
Mission Impossible is now the biggest American action franchise from that same time period. But like for every Beverly Hillbillies you remember, there was one of those like down Periscope. You're like, oh, I forgot they did that. So Cuervo, since we're getting off topic a smidge here, you and your wife watch this, both seem to enjoy it. Are you definitely going to pursue, I will say cold opens do continue to be pretty cool in this series because without spoiling, part of the way to keep this going is that they make a movie, an in-universe movie called Stab. And like a cool way to play on the Ghostface thing is like a bunch of people show up in that costume to the premiere. So like the idea of like killers can still exist in this world still makes some sense. They stretch it maybe a time or two, but like it makes sense why Sydney and others still get hunted and haunted throughout.
I think, I'm pretty eager to keep going now because I know less and less as they go on. So there will be a lot more surprises moving forward. I'm not a huge slasher. I mean, I love the proto slashers like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween, of course, but the whole kind of slasher craze of the 80s I just didn't have a ton of affection for it. I would catch some here or there. I wasn't like a prude about them. I just preferred I like monster movies better than slasher movies. It's just always been kind of my bag.
Nobody's perfect, so don't feel bad.
I know. This is we've had this argument time and time again. However, this is a really creative twist on it. So yeah, I kind of want to keep going and see if there's continuing rewards down the line. But
I think you'll be happy if you do the Scream series. I mean, look, like some are better than others. Scream 2 is great. Scream 3 is just kind of okay, but 4 is really good, 5 is really good, and what Scream has going for it is they haven't had its like franchise killingly bad entry that a lot of other ones have, and then it like stunts the franchise. Like even Scream 3, which is most people's least favorite, is still not without its charms. And while the running joke of Scream 3 is the movie Scream 1 was making fun of, isn't entirely inaccurate. It's still a good movie. It's still fun. It's still got that. Like the thing about Scream 2 is Scream also, not Scream 2. The thing about the Scream movies is you always have the who's doing it aspect to keep you interested.
Yeah.
Even if there's some stuff that's not as good as in the original, you're still like, well, I got to know who's doing it.
I think I like that the most about, I mean, the slasher formula became the kind of creative kills, right? Like that became the slasher sequel formula. Whereas this one does have that mystery component, the whodunit aspect to it, that is immensely entertaining. I could see that being a lot more rewarding than it being just about the kills, which is
I think it gives you a baseline of like interest that you may not have in, like you talked about. Like, I mean, there's really not a crazy amount of gore in Scream.
No.
And there's really not a crazy amount of gore in any of the Screams. I mean, it's not without its gore. It's definitely R-rated, but like, it's not a crazy. It was kind of the first one to not make it about the kills, but make it about the who's doing it. And
it's the suspense. Yeah. It's everything leading up to the kill and I think I appreciate that, creatively.
Well, that's kind of harkening back to the, like, Halloween is very much in that same ilk, where like the original Halloween didn't have all these insane kills. They get more insane as the series goes on. Right. But Halloween was very much just a guy with a knife wandering around stabbing people. And like, that's what this kind of gets back to. It was Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th that kind of kicked off that can you top this game of the kills have to be insane? Right. Which, got me through my teens, which is great. But like, this one was smart to go back to it puts the
proto slasher kind of template. Yeah.
It puts story ahead of kills in a way that people had really, and we didn't really talk about it, but like horror was dead as a doornail when this movie came out. Like you could not get slashers especially. You could not get a slasher made. There was like a 5-6 year span where nobody was making slashers. Right. And it was because people had gotten tired of all the stuff you're talking about. And like technology had gotten to the point where like anything was possible. And so you had a bunch of like bad VFX and like horror in general and slashers were just kind of in a really bad place. And this movie, for better or worse, better overall, probably worse for the slashers that came right after, just really jump started the genre and the subgenre again in like a really big way and gave us some really good stuff. I mean, and I think like, there's certainly, stuff that's coming out now and coming out in the last like 5-6 years that probably wouldn't exist had Scream not brought a buzzsaw back to the horror genre. But that happens, right? Every 10-15 years, something jumpstarts the horror genre. You saw with Saw as well when the Scream movies got tired.
Weirdly, it's usually like a new generation of filmmakers that does that, whereas this was, one of the heavyweights.
Well, I would argue this was both, which is probably why it's great.
Oh, that's
Evan
true.
Williamson
the writer was the new up and comer. Yeah.
He was the one who was trying to break the mold. He was the one that was trying to do something different and edgy. And like you got all of that, but then in the hands of an absolute master. I mean, a Mount Rushmore horror filmmaker in Wes Craven. And it was just magic. Like, legitimately this movie, I mean, look, it's not my all-time favorite horror movie, but it's on the list, right? It's a movie that when people talk about all-time favorite horror movies, this comes up in the same voice as Halloween and Suspiria and, The Shining and Jaws. And like, I think it's a combination of those two things. I think it's you taught an old dog new tricks.
Some of that may be nostalgia glasses for you, because I would definitely not put it on the same shelf as.
Well, I'm not talking about me necessarily. I mean, just people in general. I think it is a movie that when you see top 10 lists of all time horror movies, it's almost always in there. So I'm talking about just like people at large. It's not my favorite horror movie, but it's in the top 15 probably for me. But yeah, I mean, it's a movie that's remembered as an all time great. And I think that's because of Craven and Williamson kind of bringing out the best in each other.
That's a good point. Yeah.
You hear that, Shawn? I made a good point.
Well, broken clock. So we talked about the better or worse of it all and like what it might have done as far as influence and studios taking wrong lessons from everything successful in the knockoffs. But yeah, right place, right time. I don't consider one of the greats either, but I do think to something that would piss off, 1995 Alex Cuervo is that it is more palatable because of the fact that it's a bit satirical. It's a bit whodunit. It's a bit more story driven than upping kills. How some of the big iconic franchises have diminishing returns on those sequels. And you're just looking for like a fun kill. I do think this one's easier to watch for folks, and it is more, I won't say gateway horror, but it's something that won't give you nightmares the way certain like truly psychological horror things can do.
But it's smart. That's the thing, is I think I probably would have enjoyed it back then because it is clever. It's just well constructed. It's well written. It's well directed. It's just a smart movie. And it's way, given the cast and the way that it was marketed, it's way fucking smarter than anything would indicate, and I think that was the most surprising thing about it for me.
Shawn, I have a question on air. I want to get your answer here.
Yes.
Can we do mini? No, we've never talked about this. Can we do mini episodes, like little 10-minute mini-sodes of Alex Cuervo watching the rest of the Scream franchise?
I think a special one-off for like an off week where we just have like Cuervo returns and talks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we could do
well, that requires him to have to watch all of them.
I'll do it. I'd
Cuervo Scream Omnibus. Yeah.
I would
Scream sequel Omnibus.
Maybe we could do that, or we could just do like he watches Scream 2. We show up for 15 minutes, we shoot the shit about it and leave. Like I'm open to this. I want to take Cuervo through the world, and then maybe after he watches all the Screams, we start hitting the I Know What You Did Last Summer. It's the Valentine, the Teaching Mrs. Tingles.
Easy on him on that. Yeah, I think The Faculty is one. Have you seen The Faculty, Cuervo?
Yeah, I have. Actually, I saw that in the theaters.
And that's got a big, I feel like that's gotten that Jennifer's Body reassessment in the past decade where people are like, no, you don't understand. This truly was good of its moment. Yes. But like a lot of people really love it. And I've seen a lot of positive reassessment of that one.
I don't think I've seen that movie since I saw it in the theater, and I liked it. Don't get me wrong. I think I owned it at one point, even though I don't know whether I ever watched it on DVD. But
Modern
it does seem to be one of those that the internet is now in love with over the past like 5 years. It comes up more and more and more. So I would be curious to see it again. I mean, I liked it a lot, but it didn't blow me away.
I liked it okay. I didn't hate it. I thought I was going to hate it going into it.
You think you're going to hate everything, you fucking hipster?
Well, look, that was 25-year-old me. I'm older and kinder and gentler now. All right, like I'm not.
Yeah, but we're talking about that. We're talking about when Faculty came out. That was like 28-year-old Cuervo. Yeah. He was probably just as bad.
He was probably worse.
There's another one too, though, with a who's who of actors that are now much bigger.
Oh yeah.
Kind of to that point, Cuervo, as we're going to wrap up here in a moment. Do you have any other major blind spots in horror? Is there a field of it like giallo or something that you're not particularly versed on, or
no? I bet he knows giallo.
No, I've seen a lot of giallo
citing a type of
I honestly, a lot of the like Friday the 13th sequels, I've got a ton of blind spots in slasher franchises like that because I just never really diligently kind of pursued.
That's why the mini episodes are happening, Shawn.
Well, I think honestly, yeah, just a lot of the kind of slasher sort of, the umbrella of slasher sequels specifically, because I've seen all of the original films that launched the franchises, but I kind of my interest dropped off on the sequels.
So did the filmmakers in a lot of those franchises.
Okay, we're gonna play rapid fire really quick. Have you seen Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors?
Yes.
Have you seen Friday the 13th Part 4, the one with Corey Feldman?
Wait.
What is it? Final Chapter, I think?
Final Chapter, yeah.
The good one?
No, I have not.
Oh, how dare you. How did you make Scare Package and not have seen the
because again, I was aware, it's been referred to in pop culture enough times that I was aware of it. But yeah, the Corey Feldman joke at the end, of course.
You're not allowed to laugh at that scene ever again until you see that movie. What about Halloween 3, Season of the Witch?
Gatekeepers.
Oh, of course I've seen Halloween 3. Yeah,
okay.
I've seen all.
You're all right there. You're not too bad. 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3.
Yeah, I mean Carpenter's a different, like that's a whole other thing for me.
Okay.
You're a genre fan, so obviously that was the first question. But any larger blind spots in other aspects of movies like classic, silent, Western, you name it? Is there any other period you feel you're not versed on very well?
The one on the when we were talking, when we were sort of considering doing this, and this one stuck out because it's a pretty glaring one. I'd seen most of the other films on that list. Nothing else stuck out to me quite as boldly as Scream.
Yeah, I think you heard it here, folks. The last time you're going to see Alex Cuervo on this show because he has no.
I mean, I'd love to do it again. I just can't think of any.
He's got Scream sequels. We're doing the mini. Sure. Cameron, stay consistent. You keep telling me we got to do minis.
You weren't letting me. You're keeping conspiring against me. You wanted to do them all.
Just violently lurching back and forth, Cameron. Yeah.
Well, now
I'm about to get a new co-host. You're screaming at people, telling them they can't laugh at our jokes because they don't get them. You're the very gatekeeper that Scare Package was making fun of.
Oh God, what have I become? Well, stay tuned for the next episode where I go to horror movie counseling and we talk through my anger issues. I do think we should do something with Cuervo doing the rest of the Scream movies, whether it's all one big ginormo episode or whether we do little baby episodes where we check in or like a segment.
Throughout the year, as he watches them, we do a little 15-minute bit. We hit a timer. Timer goes off. He's done talking about it, and we'll collect that into the Scream sequel omnibus for next October.
Yes. Mid, he has to stop talking when the buzzer goes off, even if he's mid-sentence. Like, it's done. We hit the unrecord button the minute we stick to the 15 minutes and we hit the unrecord button. I'm there for that. We can do anything we want, Shawn. We're the only two people that listen to this. We can do anything we want. We're bound by nothing.
I wish I had a buzzer for you. So before we let Cuervo go, do you have anything you'd like to plug or promote, website, or anything you can talk about that you've done, anything you want to direct people to?
Oh, shoot. So a film I scored, Cannibal Mukbang, is making the festival circuit right now. It's been in a bunch of horror festivals.
So because you scored that, by the way, because I saw that, sorry not to interrupt your plug, but because you scored that, I looked up what mukbang was.
Nice.
And I was happy to see that it was not a weird porn thing that was going to ruin my searches. But I now know what mukbanging is, and it's weird. Yeah. But I'm even more interested in this movie. So, Shawn, if you don't know what mukbanging is, clearly you're not cool with what the kids know.
I didn't know what it was when I was first pitched working on the film. I educated myself quickly and have since become probably more aware of it.
Shawn, do you know what that is?
I have recently learned what this is because I have friends who are very online. So, it involves eating and streaming, right? Yeah. Is that the same thing I'm thinking of?
Yeah. It's like Twitch streaming games, but it's eating.
Yep.
Kids are fucking weird now, man. Shawn, I've cursed twice. We might have to put the restriction.
No, you're good. No, hopefully only adults are listening to this anyway, and if they can't handle it, then go be a weird Disney adult. I don't know what to tell you. But
take it to the internet. We need the publicity. Yeah, so Cannibal Mukbang, excited to see that whenever it shows up in my world or in a festival near me.
Let him finish his plugs.
And that's what I was going to do. That's what I was going to do. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to promote? Anything?
No, I mean, just basically, I guess if you're ever in Taylor, Texas, pop into our bookstore. My wife and I own a bookstore called Curia Mervosa, small independent bookstore. I've got more films coming up on the horizon, but I don't know how much I can say about them right now. But.
Well, Alex Cuervo is the greatest composer of his generation. Even if he won't say it, I will. So there will be plenty of movies, for plenty more scores from him in the Paper Street universe and elsewhere. We don't like to let him out of his box to go other places, but every once in a while. Alex, thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this, man. It was every bit as exciting as I thought it was going to be.
Thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking to both of you.
I appreciate it, buddy. Well, we will let you go back to composing great scores and working at the bookstore.
All right,
brother. Talk to you soon.
Alex. Thanks so much.
All right, bye-bye. Alex.
All right, thanks again to Alex Cuervo. Glad he took to Scream as Cameron predicted he would, and looks like he might go further into the sequels now, as it certainly lent itself to the franchise that came after.
Yeah, hopefully we at least get a little mini-sode for episode 2, because I think everyone, thinks that's probably the second best Scream movie. But yeah, maybe if we don't make Alex Cuervo angry and he keeps at it, we can do little mini-sodes all the way through the Scream franchise and kind of see where he lands. So I think that'd be fun. We talked about doing like a little 15-minute mini episodes, and that makes as much sense as any. So hopefully we get to do that. But yeah, it was great to have Alex on, hear where he lands on that. And I'm glad that he dug it.
No, certainly. And he was kind of just the right pick for this, as we try to find folks who have the right movie they've missed and something in the horror franchise genre that Cuervo had not seen. This was a big one. So yeah, fun one. Happy to revisit this one. I know it's much more fresh in your brain than mine. I truly hadn't seen this one in a number of years. And now that I'm doing the same thing, I'm going to be watching 2, 3, 4 in an effort to finally watch 5 and 6, which I have slacked off on. Same as everybody. Like you said, when you don't see it right away, which I didn't see 5 right away. I was busy. By the time 6 rolled around only a year later, I'm like, well, I have to see 5 still. So yeah, I will be jumping on that myself to cure some blind spots.
There you go. I'll come along for the ride. I'll rewatch them all just because I like them, and we'll bring that to the viewer, hopefully, or the viewer.
This is now a Scream podcast. The listener, the ear viewer.
Yes.
Yeah. We're converting this into a full Scream podcast, it sounds like, with all these new ideas.
That's right.
But wrapping up, thank you all for listening with your ear viewers. This has been a presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Alex Cuervo was late to the party, but we're glad he made it. Check out paperstreetpodcast.com for some show notes and plugs for him and where to find him and he and his wife's bookstore in Taylor, Texas, among other things. So for Cameron, I am Shawn Talley. Don't be late to the party.
Happy spooky season.